Hello everyone, welcome back to Trek-A-Day. The third season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds is officially underway. And if you're new to the channel, the way I typically do these is I give my just immediate overall impressions of episodes as they air for these new series. My very just kind of immediate off-the-cuff thoughts, and maybe come back later as the season unfolds, like towards the end of the wrap-up, and give more of my overall impressions of the flow of the season and some thoughts after I've maybe been able to sit on some episodes for a while. I just watched the premiere episode, the conclusion to our cliffhanger from Season 2, and then I'm going to go ahead and press play after recording this on the second episode of Season 3. And overall, like that Hegemony Part 1 final episode of Season 2, I enjoyed the episode, but wasn't blown away. I thought it was a pretty solid beginning for the season, but it wasn't this extraordinary, edge-of-your-seat thrill ride. But overall, again, I think it worked. The Gorn, I said before, I'm not completely sold on this reworking of the Gorn, turning them from less of an aggressive, reptile-like, but intelligent alien species just at odds with us into something that feels more like the aggressive monster of the week, a very kind of alien from the Alien franchise feeling type figure. But for what they have made, like working within the framework of this interpretation of the Gorn, it has been really well done. The mix of the practical effects and the costumes, some of the behind the scenes stuff is really good from Season 2. And mixing that with the CG's worked well. So overall, it's kind of a mixed bag where I'm not really liking this reinterpretation of the Gorn, but within that reinterpretation, I think they've done an excellent job of portraying what they're trying to portray, and I think it worked very well, and the action was done well here, and the editing was very tight. The writing for, again, what they are creating worked well within this episode. Like, nothing felt out of balance. The little character moments, the emotional pings, like even the bits of humor, nothing dragged on or really felt at odds with the tone of what was overall happening. So overall, the production was well put together. It was high quality, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. The solution to the issue, again, I try not to go too crazy in depth with these, maybe for like later discussion, just give my general thoughts, but they're not spoiler free, because I do want to talk about some elements that I am anticipating if you're watching this, you've watched these episodes. So the solution I found to be a little too unbelievable and simplistic given the severity of the situation, but I really did appreciate the fact that it was less of a shoot 'em up and explosion type solution and more of something with at least an attempt at a scientific twist, at least going in that more of a Star Trek angle to solving the problem. I like that, at least, because it could very well have gone the other route, and an attempt to tie it into the period of dormancy and the surprise when Kirk does eventually encounter the Gorn. So at least an attempt to do that. And again, giving pause long enough in moments to continue some more character development stories tying in from the last season. Although in saying that, still Eric Ortega is the only aspect of her personality is I fly the ship. That's it. I read a book recently, one of the Strange New Worlds books, where it focused more on her character, and I said in that book review how it was nice to see her actually get more of a character, and then we come back to the show's back for another season, and immediately that's all that she is. But we'll see, because I think this next episode, again, I haven't watched the next one yet, I think might be more of a showcase for her, so I'm hoping she at least gets some more time to develop. But everyone else, again, was solid, and I'm so torn on the new Scotty, because on one hand, the actor is fantastic. I think he is spot on, like, really what to make a younger version of a legacy character. He's doing a great job. He fits the role. He's so much better than Simon Pegg was. I think if you're going to do a young Scotty from this time period, he pulls it off beautifully. But at the same time, I'm torn because it also highlights one of my biggest complaints with Strange New Worlds, that it is a show with such short seasons. It spends an inordinate amount of time on being a setup show for TOS. Like, there's, for a show that only has 10 episode seasons, the percentage of screen time and story time that is spent developing it as setting up TOS rather than letting the characters who are unique to Pike's time really have the time to shine is disappointing. I'd want to spend more time if we're given a show with Captain Pike. I really want to see Pike and those characters who are original to that time frame be given the vast majority of the time, and it just feels like way too much is spent on more of it being a setup for like a TOS remake series. And again, I know we're going to see that Captain Kirk come back multiple times, and he was already in way too much of the show to begin with. That's just one issue that I've had that I know is going to be ongoing through this season of Strange New Worlds, where I feel like it spends too much time being a setup for TOS rather than letting the characters of its time truly take up the vast majority of the storytelling. But we'll see how it plays out. I mean, so far, this first episode, not perfect, but was a pretty solid start to the season. Overall, I found it to be enjoyable. So we'll move on to episode 2, and then I'll come back here and give you my thoughts on that. Now, moving on to episode 2, Wedding Bell Blues, which had a few nice surprises for me. It was very much what I expected overall, but there were a few things that stood out. Of course, after coming off the heels of a very dramatic, action-heavy conclusion to a previous cliffhanger, they were going to do something a little more lighthearted. That was guaranteed, and this episode very much kept a silly tone throughout the entire story, starting with the Enterprise, which has been in space dock for months getting repairs. It is now a centennial celebration of the founding of the Federation, and Christine Chapel is coming back, and Spock is anticipating her arrival, but unexpectedly she brings along with her Roger Corby, who she has fallen in love for, and I feel like they did at least a decent job of exploring the awkwardness and tension of that trio and that relationship with Spock and Corby and Chapel, and building on the bit of a background with Roger Corby and Christine, and making that kind of fit with then what we saw in TOS, and that element worked fairly well. And then we get into the unexpected direction of the silliness. At first it seemed like it was going to rely a lot more on that awkward tension and the introduction of Eric Ortega's brother and little things like that. I thought that's where a lot of the comedic silliness was going to be, but thankfully they added a different element with a character who is very clearly Trelane or another member of the Continuum, very much focusing on that imagery, but they really were going for kind of replaying that TOS storyline as he, without being named, sneaks into the situation by portraying himself as a bartender, giving Spock a drink, and Spock awakens to an alternate reality where they are actually there rather than to celebrate the centennial, to celebrate the wedding, the marriage of Spock and Christine, leaving at first only Roger Corby aware they're in an alternate reality. And that's where a lot of the silliness comes from, is this alternate reality and trying to resolve the situation, awaken people from this spell, and become aware of the situation. And it was never as kind of eye-rolling as I thought it was going to be. It was also, though, never really laugh out loud funny. It kind of straddled that middle ground where it was just kind of silly, but it was never outright hilarious, and at the same time it never fell into embarrassing territory with sometimes the humor of Stranger Worlds can land. So it was kind of like right in that middle. It wasn't a favorite episode of mine at all. It wasn't really anything spectacular, but at the same time it wasn't as bad as it could have been. There was one joke that might pass some people by, but there was the one joke that really worked for me that I thought was hilarious was when Spock is surprised by his bachelor party, in Captain Pike's quarters, and they go to serve the drinks. They start to pour Saurian brandy, and Scotty puts his hand over his glass and says, no, I'm not really a drinker. I don't really touch this stuff. That little bit in the alternate reality, that joke got me. That was pretty good. But that's really the only time I laughed for the entire almost 50 minutes. So it was just kind of silly. But wasn't terrible, and I did the Trelane thing kind of worked, and we got a really cool little voice-only cameo from John Delancey, who, again, it's very much a Trelane thing. It's revealed that he is still a child, even though he's 8,000 years old, and the nebulous just voice of a parental figure, just like in the TOS episode, comes and scolds him and puts everything right. And that was just kind of a fun little cameo, a fun little nod, and I liked that. But then it brought about a thought in my mind of a cameo that would have been much better considering the circumstances. That I'm not sure how that was missed. Was at the end, as they are trying to calm things down, bring things back to normal, and have the celebration of the centennial. If you're gonna have that, maybe why not have Scott Bakula just as they play for the centennial, a recording of an old speech of Captain Archer. That would have been a fantastic way of ending the episode and putting that note of a true celebration of the Federation and what it stands for, and a hopeful look towards the future as an ending point for the episode, instead of having everyone on the dance floor dancing to Wham. And don't get me wrong, Wake Me Up Before You Go, I love that song, but it just felt a little odd. I mean, it fit the silliness of the episode, but I felt like it needed an ending point that was tonally a little less goofy and a little more core of Star Trek feeling. Really, I think we needed that. And we get a little hint of, Ortega's at the end dealing with some PTSD from the Gorn. But, yeah, really, I felt like the ending was a bit odd and could have been done better. And the whole episode, again, was silly, but not just outright hilarious. It could have been funnier. It just sort of was there. It wasn't bad. It was just kind of okay. It was an okay episode overall. That's what I'll say about it. It was kind of middle of the road. There were some things I liked, and overall it was just kind of okay. The one thing that hurts it for me, though, and the same thing as when in season 1 they did sort of their alternate reality alternate timeline take of redoing the Balance of Terror, and it's the same idea where anytime Strange New Worlds does something that is so directly referencing, almost not redoing, but very much more than a wink and a nod, a much stronger reference to a TOS episode, it highlights just how inferior Strange New Worlds is to TOS. Don't get me wrong, I like a lot of Strange New Worlds, and I think when it does something really original but still Star Trek feeling, Strange New Worlds can be fantastic. It can really, the high points are really, really high. But whenever it draws that direct comparison to TOS, it just falls flat because it really shows how much better that thing that they're emulating was. And so I think that's part of what hurt it a little bit for me, was constantly in my mind while watching, seeing the comparison, the Squire Gothos, seeing that, and it's just not quite as good. So yeah, it was just kind of an okay episode, but I'm actually happy about it. I'm a little bit surprised because I was expecting, just from some of the previews and the way some of the silliness can go with Strange New Worlds, for it to really be disappointing. I was honestly not looking forward to this episode. I was expecting to genuinely dislike it, and I didn't. It was just kind of okay. And so I'm happy about that it just kind of okay is a lot better than I was expecting. And the first episode, again, as I said, was a pretty strong start. So overall, it's not like I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible, I'm so happy it's back, but I'm not disappointed yet in season 3. It's actually a halfway decent start to the season, so I'm looking forward to the next episode, because I'm really hoping that maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised that things are starting off on not an incredible note, but on a positive note. Just it's not bad. It's fairly decent so far, and that's not a bad place to start.